All right, let's do this body. Let's do this body. So I'm gonna follow similar process to the other ones. We already have it painted on this layer. We could probably continue on that one for start, but I'll just stay on paint 2. So kind of similar, where I'm just going to grab a brighter color and start pulling out the form a bit more. And then this is mirrored, so we only got to worry about one half of this guy, thankfully. Front and back, though. So let's start pulling out these shapes. I'm going to keep most of the brightness towards the top, as well as add some soft shadowing from where the intersection is, so it feels like it's more on top. It feels pretty good right now, but we could do better. Let's go ahead and hide the rest. So body and tabard. And why not give it the belt? Cool. So right here, start painting it out. I'm going to also do some edging here just to pop the shapes a little more. We already have our alpha painted in, so we don't have to worry about that. And I'm going to lock the tabard so I can't paint on that one right now. Now, I did this really kind of sloppy. I couldn't paint over it, or I can get rid of that and start fresh, but it's not terrible, so I think I'm just going to paint over it. Depending on how sloppy you are with your block out, sometimes it's easier just to lower the opacity and go on top, or erase it and go on top, but I don't feel too bad about it. I'm probably not going to go too nuts here. I'm going to keep this one fairly simple, and we'll do a lot of the rest of it in the lighting and then detailing, but kind of want to make it a little roughed up. I'm going to tint the shadows a little red, just because I think it'll look nice with the red nearby. Even though, yeah, this is silver right here, but it should be okay, color combination wise. If not, we'll change it. That's the other thing. Gotta remind myself not to be afraid to take risks sometimes, because you can always just change it back. That's a good way to find new things that work for you when you're painting. Just try something out. If it doesn't work, throw it back. If it does, well, shit. Just got something new in your toolbox. When I paint, you'll see me throwing down a lot of shapes and then getting rid of them and then throwing more down. A lot of it is just to see what kind of shapes are going to work, because I have a hard time always predicting what I want or what will look good. And so there's no harm in putting some stuff down. Basically, similar to what we were just saying with taking risks on how you paint, but also with what you paint. And sometimes it just won't work out, but that's okay. You learn what doesn't work out. It's a little too dark right there. So go ahead and lighten that up a little. I know it's in shadow, but some of it was getting a little dark. Now right here too, this is very what's the word? It's kind of desaturated, so I'm gonna just kick up the saturation and then use a soft brush and paint over it a little. A lot of this stuff you could also do later. To be clear, you can go ahead and do this. We're gonna do like a color correction pass, but anywhere I see it, ideally I'd like to just correct it a little. So we'll just give it a little more saturation. That feels a little better to me already. Still want to keep it dark, but it just feels better to me. Get those shadows in from above. Probably pull this up a little. Yeah. Okay, I'll go back to my hard brush and then start painting over some of the changes we just made. I kind of beveled the bottom here, added some thickness. So instead of taking that, what were we calling it? the trim or the highlight on the edge there, the edging, all the way to the edge. Sometimes it's really nice to have it bend, have your shape kind of have a thickness to it, especially with hand painting, and then make the edge a little in from that. And that way it'll feel like, oh, it has some thickness there. Now, this is not a material that's going to have a ton of thickness, so I don't want to go overboard with that. But just having a little visually can make a pretty big difference as to how it feels. Or I guess how the object reads. When you look at it from afar, whether or not you know what the geometry is, you might not know it's a plane because you gave it a little more thickness there, so your eyes are thinking, oh, okay, it's it's this, it has a thickness to it. You fake it. Okay, I guess we should deal with the inside there too, huh? Fine, I guess. I kind of like keeping the paint a little sloppy. Personal preference. I feel like it's easier to go in and clean stuff up afterwards. Once you see all the shapes and form that you want, you can kind of pick and choose, like, okay, I'll get rid of this highlight and I'll blend these shapes together, with the smooth brush. But it's more fun to have like those brush strokes. That's just me. But again, there's a time and place for everything. And right now, it's the time and the place to put in these seams. So I'm going to try to use a bigger brush than usual. I like using bigger brushes when I remember to, at least. Should probably paint with this in mind, actually, because this is going to be there, right? Oh yeah, that's low poly, huh? Ooh boy, ain't nothing wrong with that. Let's just grab some of this color and we'll just put it around the outside here. Again, with the transition, with the grounding, we'll make it so it looks like an intentional transition instead of it just socketed in there. At least where people are going to see it. I also recommend, if you're watching this and you don't have a tablet or any kind of pressure sensitivity, it's certainly worth investing in one, having the pen with pressure sensitivity, because being able to have like a light stroke and then really dark stroke, or like, go from where it's really subtle to really visible is super helpful and a big time saver. Plus, it allows you to just be way more expressive with your art. I think there's some that are rather cheap now in the Intuos line, or Bamboo, or whatever they're calling them. So if you're watching this still using a mouse, I encourage you to see if you can get a pen tablet, either used or from a friend or parents, whoever. It's totally worth it. And it's industry standard. Okay, let's see. One thing we also might want to do is the transition on the arm part, right? We don't want to just leave it bare like that. Like, I mean, I know it can work. It looks all right, but let's give it a little more love. Let's give it just a little more love, just a little. Once I put my brush down here, okay, let's save it, and then I'm gonna select the, well, not select the arm, but make it paintable again. And I like the idea of like straw and stuff coming out. These filled with hay or something. So I'm just gonna start putting down dark strokes at first. Let's see, paint. I'm gonna do a new layer here too. Arm stuff, and then I'm just gonna start painting. I made a new layer just in case I wind up not liking it. You could also lock. I'll actually show you that, where you can lock to a layer transparency and then paint only within that layer, like a clipping mask in Photoshop. I think it's really useful to know. So right now I'm just kind of making like a silhouette of straw type shapes. The idea here, or at least the goal, is just to cover up the transition so it's not so flat and like a straight line, right? It's just like hard edge. This way there's a little transition to it. And so we're not going to stay only with the dark colors, don't you worry. Just trying to paint in a bunch of lines for us to work with. You could think of this as painting in a mask right now. Okay, so now what you want to do is you can go ahead, and if you want to use this as a mask, you could just paint right on top of it too. Not a big deal. But if you did want to constrain your paint to just what we just painted, I believe it's right-clicking and then... Oh, actually, you could either freeze the pixels and invert your freeze, or if you control-click the layer, it freezes everything else. And now we can go up to the top and say show hide freeze, which I have hotkeyed as Control F. I'm not sure if that's default or not. But now if you click that, show hide freeze, it looks like nothing's happening. But if I use that hotkey, you can see everything else is frozen. So anything with the checkerboard right now, you're not going to be able to paint on. You could try, it's not going to work. And it's only going to do that to the objects that are visible right now. So if we unhid something, that should be fine. So I unhide the sword. Oh no, it got that too. Okay, good. So with the control click, it's just giving you what you had on that layer. That's awesome. So it's good to know. And now, why is it beneficial? Because now we can go ahead and paint on top of it, and it's only painting in those pixels. So that's really useful. So now I'll go in and I'll just like brighten up some of it. Now you can see how this could be useful now. So I don't have to worry about painting in the lines because we already have the lines. Now you could unfreeze it by going freeze and then unfreeze all. That way you can start painting on everything again. So that way you're not stuck in that mode wondering how the heck you escape. So I'm going to turn that off right now. Unfreeze all. Now we can just paint wherever again. So I'm just going to paint in some shadows. So nothing huge, but it kind of makes the transition a little nicer, I think. And same thing here. I don't want that to be a hard line, so I'm just going to paint over. Now, if you're having this issue where it's only painting on like one or the other, up here you could toggle where it says connective picking. I believe volume based will now let you paint on both simultaneously. Whereas before, it's going to favor one mesh or the other, whatever your mouse touches first, I believe. So if you change that up here to volume based, you're going to be able to paint it a lot easier. So now we're getting rid of that seam completely, right? It's just kind of vanishing. So we don't know where one object starts and the other begins in a good way. I definitely recommend utilizing that. Yeah, I'm just kind of being really painty down here, really sloppy with the paint, just kind of mixing it together. Because it's hay, it's not like, or straw or whatever, it's not, it doesn't have to be super specific lines. It's kind of messy, you know, by nature, is what I meant to say. Yeah, I'll just leave it. Yeah. Okay, so it's subtle. We know it's there. I might darken the bottom a little. Okay. All right, now we ain't done yet. Oh, that was all on arm stuff. Oh no, arm stuff. That's okay. I'm gonna rename arm stuff Paint 3 because I like naming all my layers Paint, at least in this case. So we also want to do the threads, right? So I'm gonna go with like a. Should we go gray or should we do dark? Maybe like a dark, kind of like the rope. So we'll get from the rope here, and we could do the same thing. Well, I already painted on that layer, so we could combine it down if we wanted to make a new layer. But in this case, I'm just gonna paint on top. this is another situation where if you freeze the transparency, it could come in handy, but we're just going to go with it. I'm going to build up from the darks. So we start with very dark, and then I'm just going to lighten it a little at a time. Probably don't need too much, to be honest. And then we could give the holes some space. So like where it's sewn into. We can just imply those a bit. We don't have to get too detailed there. Making it a little too busy. Just trying to flesh out the bottom, but not finding a solution that I'm in love with, so I'll just leave it. Okay. We got the body there, we got the arms, we should do the neck. Side looks pretty good. It looks weird up close, right? Because you're painting so hard, but further back, it's kind of working. Okay. However, this one has like a cross on both. Just want one side to look like it's overlapping, not both of them. There we go. Well, from far away, it's kind of it's kind of both ways. Okay. Body. Boop. Okay. Where's the... Oh, here it is. I think I want this part to be wood. And then this part to be like hanging over it, like a sack, like a potato sack or something. Oh no, the head's not mirrored. I'm a dum dum. Oh, that's okay. Gives us more room to be expressive. Just wanted to get rid of some of the muddiness down here first. Probably not really going to see the neck, so I'm not going to spend more than a couple minutes on any of this. Though sometimes it's hard to stop yourself. We'll see if we can differentiate the arms and body a little more when we do the color. I'm not hating it now. Like earlier, I was kind of having a problem with it, but it's not bothering me as much anymore. But I'd still like to try. This generic wood. It's going to be mostly covered, so not too worried about that. Okay, we'll stick with that for now. And then if we want to make more edits, we can. Let's just do the back real quick. Something like that could be cool. It actually looks like it's sewn on. Leads, it makes more sense with the fantasy too. I like the back one more. I'm like looking at the back, like, what is it about the back I like more? That's not that big of a deal. I just think it's funny that I'm like evaluating it so hard. Okay. All right, let's put that helm back on there. Okay, next we're gonna have to tackle the face. That's right. I said the face. So before we do that, make sure you save it. Take a break, get up and stretch, do what you gotta do. Have a file error on save. It's okay. It's saved. I just like to save it over and over until it gives me that error. It's a hobby. All right, there we go. All right, cool. All right, the head. Let's get down to it. The last of the main pieces that we got to give some attention to. So I'm just going to take a peek around him right now. And I'm going to start paint 2 here. I switch layers like this. I know I've just been kind of bopping between them. Just to have like some kind of progression when I turn them on and off. And if I don't see anything, for example, on paint 2, there's nothing on the face. So I'll do that, and that gives me my third layer to add stuff on top of. That way I could try new things, or like if I'm not sure if it's going to work, or if I don't want to completely commit to something yet, I could paint on there and then erase it, and my other edits will still be underneath. So that's why I'm kind of using all 3 of these in tandem here. The first one we put all the lines and stuff on. So the second one, I'm going to do a majority of the painting, and then the third one, if I want to try something else with the stitches, or maybe I'll just only do the stitches on that one, stuff like that. So let's see with the head here. This guy's weird because it's just, he's like a sack. He's like I don't know, this straw material or some kind of cloth. So we're just gonna have to give the impression like we did with the shirt. It's like kind of like potato sacky. So we'll go with that. I'm going to grab some colors from down here, and let's go ahead and lock stuff like the helm. I don't want to paint on the helm right now, or the neck, and what is it? His thing around his neck. I guess it's part of the helm. It is. Okay. And then I could hide what we're still calling feather. I'll hide that. And the tongue we got. That's fine. Might hide it for now, actually. And we'll remember to paint on that. Okay. So we grab some of that warmer color. So I'm going to put that in around the shadows. It's really dark around the rest of this. And normally you would delete any of the geometry that you're never going to see. So one of the ways I could have, arguably should have done it, was get rid of like the back of his head. I might have planned to. I don't remember at this point, but get rid of the stuff on the back of his head, or under his shoulder pad or under his tabard, because we have all this body still under there. But what I'm thinking right now is that maybe we'll do a variant with the armor off and the helmet off. Maybe. We don't have the top of his head here, so maybe just with the armor off. And that way you have two versions of this guy that you could use. You know, some will have the armor and some will not. And I'll show you how we can just go in and do a paint over on the other layers and just use all the colors and values we have there and make it work without the clothes. That way we're using the texture space. Because otherwise, if you're never planning on taking his tabard or his shoulder pads off, then you could just delete that stuff before you unwrap and then save all that space. Right now I'm doing this just to get rid of the, I guess the shadows just looked kind of gross and desaturated. I want to put some color in there. So I'm just doing this for my sake, really. But I thought I would explain why. Okay, so now let's get rid of the shoulders. Need to be able to see this a little better. Okay, so now let's just rough up the texture a bit, right? I'm not going to pay too much attention to his eyes and mouth and all that right now, because we could do that on the layer above this. So I'm going to go in and just start adding some surface detail. Just I want it to look like a little wear, right? Everything's really smooth right now, so I'm just kind of going to go ahead and like give it a texture, a surface. And anywhere I see it kind of getting desaturated like that, I'm just going to crank up the saturation on my color slider and then paint in. And like I said, right now, not paying attention to the eyes and stuff, I'll just paint over them. We'll still see where they were for the most part. And then we could do our thing on top. So this is kind of sloppy right now. Depending on what you're going for, you might just keep it smooth, but kind of want the painty feel. And to give it like a surface. I know I want him to have like a faux stubble. Like it's not real beard, but like because of the hay or whatever, it gives the impression of it. Just for fun. It took me so long. It's kind of embarrassing to say, but it took me so long to understand, or at least learn the fact that shadows don't have to be black or gray or anything. It was right after college. I know after college would that I'd seen it and I'd witnessed it, and I was like paying more attention, trying to improve my painting skills. And it was like a revelation to me. I was like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean they're not just darker, darker versions? And it really made a difference. And then I got creative with like what kind of colors you put around and shadows and light, all that stuff. Same with highlights. I was like, you add white, right? No, not necessarily. Depends on a lot of things. But that's why, like, you'll see me now so adamant about changing a lot of those kind of colors, because it feels better if it's not just grayed out. So even just turning that to orange feels so much better than the dark, right? Like we have the kind of, they're just painted on desaturated, just a dark gray. Whereas now you got the orange, it just feels better, even though I haven't really done anything to it. So I just wanted to point that out. You can make fun of me if you want, or hopefully, if you're struggling with the same thing, hopefully that helps shine some light on like, oh, maybe I could play with this and improve the feel of my paintings, that kind of thing. Because like, there's a lot of things that, in hindsight, I feel like, oh, that should have been obvious to me, but they weren't, and I didn't know it for a while. Not having like a great traditional art education, didn't really learn any of that stuff. So I find all that stuff really valuable. That's on that layer. Okay. We'll leave it there for now. Okay, so now that we have like a kind of just a textured look to it right now, we'll pop up to the next layer and we'll paint on top of this. So it just has a little more going on, maybe too much. We'll find out. So let's go in and actually let's dim that stuff. I'm gonna go back to the other layer. And what I mean by dim it is I'm just gonna go over it with the other colors just to make it like more of a trace versus a harsh line. And then we'll paint over it using the locations as reference. See, like it's still there. It's a lot less visible, but it's still there. We could do that for the mouth. This almost looks like a tongue there. I was just trying to give the shadow some color. That's funny. It looks so freaking weird. I'm sorry in advance if this is creepy. Listen, we're just having fun here. Okay. It looks so creepy. All right, you can just pretend it looks not creepy, and we'll go to the next. Maybe once we put some contrast in there. So we're going to do kind of like what we did on the side of his body with those, right? And we could try, maybe we can't. Let's try something real quick. Let's try another tool that we have available in 3D Code. So I'm going to save it real quick, and I'm going to make a new layer. Not going to name it for now because we're going to hopefully collapse it back down. And let me hide the arms and the sword, and the rope. Get rid of that. So let's go ahead and try this tool over here called the Transform Copy tool. We're going to grab that. And there's a lot of settings. Right now, we just want to do, copy visible layers. That way, we get multiple layers copied instead of just the one we currently have selected. It's basically going to copy whatever we draw the marquee selection over. And then you have an option of erasing the old one. We're not going to do that. Let's see here. So I'm going to just drag out a shape, and it's going to snapshot it. Boom. So now we have that cross stitch thing basically copied temporarily. So now I can move both that and the model around and kind of place it where I want it to show up. It's the opacity is low right now because you have a preview opacity here. I could turn that up and it should become more visible. The thing I'm worried about is it's really dark over here. We'd have to lighten it up. And it's on its own layer, so we'll see what we can do. So I'm basically going to try to line this up now where I want it, and we could paste it. Right? That looks pretty good right there. So I'm just using it as a reference. I think you could rotate it. There we go. Just by clicking on the outside. Now if I press enter, it's going to paste it down. Oops. It pasted it down. Now the problem is it's really dark and it has that stitch line in the middle. So what I was going to try now, and let's do it on both eyes before we try. So I'm going to go ahead and line it up with the other eye. We'll rotate it, we'll move it. Something like that, I think. We could try that. Hit enter. And now I'll hit escape to get out of that tool. So now it's on its own layer. I guess it's not. Oh no! I wonder if when it pastes, it's pasting on the same layers it was already on. I didn't know that. That's actually new to me. It might be, we might have to do paste merged. You can paste them into a current layer. Okay, that's my fault. I'm learning something too. I didn't actually realize it went to the same layer. And it just looks even creepier. So I'm going to undo this stuff because that's not what I wanted to achieve. Oh no, I can't undo it. Well, there's a lesson that we both learned together. Is that apparently you can't undo that. I would not have expected that. I've used this tool a bunch before, but I guess not on that level. Holy camole. But you know what? That's okay. We'll work around it. That's really funny. I don't know if it is a glitch or if it actually pastes down on the current layer. I'll have to play with that more later. If you have that copy merged or the paste merged checked, it should go on the proper layer. I guess I hadn't used it like that before, but hey, we're all learning here. So that's funny. Even the old one went there. So we're just going to paint over it though. This is not the end of the world here. We're fine. So I'm going to delete this one and we're just going to clean it up to how it was. And we already have the location of the new one, right? So we should be fine. So let's go ahead and then fix it. Now I could revert my save, which, you know what? Maybe we should try that. There we go. That way you don't have to just watch me spend time doing that. And we can learn if it's doing it the proper way. So let's try that one more time. Good thing I saved. Save your work. So let's get rid of arm, sword, rope. And let's try that one more time because I don't want to give up. So we're going to go ahead and let's see what this says. Nothing. Paste merged. If you've already copied all the visible layers, you can merge and paste them into the current layer. That's what we want to try to do. Let's see if it does what we're expecting. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to grab this one again. Boom. Now let's go place it on his face. Gently. One, enter. And I'm going to toggle it real quick. Yeah, there we go. That's what we wanted. Man, look at that. That's cool. And then this one, just want to make sure it's in the right spot. I mean, we could always change the spot too if we want. But I just want to get it close. Press enter, press escape. So now we have them on their own layer. Why did we want this on their own layer? Because now I'm going to use my erase tool. Oopsies. My erase tool and get rid of everything around it. I mean, I know it's not the most complex shape, but you could picture how this would help with like other repeatable shapes that you have on your model. You know, whether it's stitching, whether it's bolts and screws and stuff, you could see the application. So let's get rid of these. I also want to show one other thing, just piggybacking off something we talked about earlier. So let's see, get this erased. Okay, now that that's erased and we got those on his face, they're really dark. I don't want them to be that dark. Let's go ahead and we'll do what we did before, where we control click the layer, and now we're only controlling those. And so I'm going to press Control F again up here. It show or hides the freeze. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to choose a lighter color and paint over it very lightly. And so there we go. We can do that. And now they're brightened up. And I could also just grab the color and paint, knowing that it's not going to go out of the lines. And that means I could also grab a darker color and push that in without worrying about painting in the wrong spot. Now, I'm not too concerned with going out of the lines here, even after I turn off the freeze, because we probably want to change the location and proportions of these a little. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn off the frozen area, which I believe is Control D, unfreeze all. And now we can go ahead and we could merge this down. I'm going to clean it up a bit more first. Just trying to round it out a little. And then darken the sides where it's going to turn and go into his face. It sounds so brutal. Okay. Now, if we wanted, we could change the overlap on the eyes too, because they're the same. We copy pasted the same thing, but it seems fine right now. Change our minds later. Let's get the other stitches in there. So now here, we don't have a lot of resolution to work with, but we have enough. Also, I don't want the stitches going that way, do I? Do I want it to go down and then across? I know, because we kind of constructed a face out of this, so it's kind of weird. I shall admit, it's pretty weird. I'm not gonna let that skirt pass me. This is so much creepier than I expected. It's fine. It's fine. We're fine. just embrace the creepiness. We'll see. Let's get that tongue back in there too. It's supposed to be like friendly. I think it might be the angle of how I'm treating this this line. I want it to be like a silly expression, but it doesn't feel like a silly expression. It feels weird. I'm thinking maybe it's like folded over. No, it would be there. Thinking if it's like a lip, right, it would have like a little part that's kind of bulging out, and maybe that was like this middle part. I guess it doesn't have to be completely. I typically try to like do things like real world, like how would they build it, but I guess it doesn't have to be. I just like to have the impression that it feels like it could have been made this way, like the way it's stitched and everything. At least that's a goal. And these are just put in there because they want them to look like eyes. All right, let's do a tongue. Now the tongue is just a piece of fabric there, so we might not even have that middle. Let's just get it looking like fabric first. Now how can we do that? Maybe we will hatching. I'm gonna think about it a bit. Like I don't hate it, but it doesn't feel like I want it to feel yet. It's really weird. Should be sewn in. Ah, it gets creepy. I start sewing stuff in. Especially this. I should have thought it through. Ah. I apologize for any nightmares. But it's starting to work actually. It feels once we take a step back, it definitely feels more like, let me get the rest of the stuff on there. Like the material and what we were going for. It's so weird. So now I got that on its own layer. I wonder if the eye cross angle has anything to do with it. So we have a smudge tool. I'm wondering if we could smudge that. And I wonder if this, I mean, it's kind of cool. It kind of looks like a animalized a little with that there. With it going down to the, oh, that's true too. We don't have to, I forgot. It doesn't necessarily have to be a stitch that's keeping the material together. It could just kind of be a style or like a detail that they put in. Like it's a fake nose kind of thing. I'm a dum-dum. See? Let your creativity flow. I mean, I didn't hate it the other way. But again, I want to try it out. Maybe I'll like it this way better. With just the things going down the middle. Do I want to leave the line there? I'm feeling better about it either way. Because that kind of like imitates a nose. What if we get rid of the top? Maybe too animal-like with that there. Maybe too Muppet-like. Ah, I can't decide. Ooh. Oh. Sorry. Making myself laugh here. E. So if I get rid of the top ones. No, that's kind of weird without you gotta commit. You gotta commit. It's kind of cool. I'll probably get rid of the lip thing there. I think that's the part that's bothering me the most right now. And then we'll just add a little brightness to round out the form of the face a little more. So remember, we still want to keep the overall shape in mind. Okay. Add the shadow from the helmet. Can make him look tired. I'm fighting all these wars. And then angle wise, I was looking at how the X's of the eyes were different. And I don't mind them right now. I'm going to bring them a little closer to how they were. It's because I hate change. Also because I wanted to try the smudge tool, which is over here. I believe it's this one, shift. Yes, what's this one? Height adjustment. We don't need that. So is this going to let me? Kind of. Not really. It's so subtle. I wanted to do it like, right? It just kind of looks poor. Like it didn't do a good job. That's okay. Cool. Push those in a little more. All right. Now we could probably put that down onto layer 3. So I'm going to merge that down. There we go. Now I'm blending this shadow in just a little. Because this shouldn't really cast a shadow. It should be more like a occlusion. But his head is turning to the point where it should be darker down there anyway. So we're just going to blend that. And I'll put some strings, or I guess rogue little hay things, like that beard idea we talked about. See if that works. A little. Might try it a different way later. It's a fun idea, though. I like the idea. This is so silly. It's not as creepy as it was, thankfully. At least I'm just going to say that. I'll just say it's not creepy, and maybe it won't be creepy. All right. Right? That's how it works. Yeah, it looks less creepy for sure. He's kind of goofy, which is what I was going for. Was a goofiness, not a creepiness. Maybe the mouth needs to be thicker. I'm looking at my concept on the other monitor, and I'm like, is it achieving what I wanted it to achieve? Okay. It definitely feels like a beard down there, which is funny, but maybe too much. So I'm just going to pick a color, flatten a couple areas out. I could also use shift to blend if I want, right? Shift blends. One of my favorite, as you've heard me say, one of my favorite tools in 3D Coat. Cool. Let's try one last thing with the tongue, I suppose. And then if not, I'll think about it while we're doing other stuff. Just want to make it a little thicker. Maybe it doesn't make sense though. Yeah, it's not really fixing what I see as the issue. So instead, we will just darken the point where it meets. Cool. Never really see the back of it, but I'll give it a little. So I don't remember if I've discussed this, but alt clicking any one of the paint objects will solo it. So if I said it before, it's just a reminder, but it's handy. I use it all the time. Cool, that's fun. And then we got the head. There we go. So next up for us is we're going to go through and we are going to add like an overlay layer or some kind of adjustment layer on top, probably overlay. And we are going to paint in our shapes, the overall big form reads of our shapes, like the volume, like is it a cylinder? Okay, let's make it feel more like a cylinder, that kind of thing. We're going to put that more into our dummy here, and we're going to brighten it up. I don't know about significantly, but it'll make a big difference. We'll do light and shadow, mostly light in this case, because I feel like that will do the job, but we'll see. And that's going to be an important step. That's going to make this guy feel more voluminous. And then after that, we'll continue on to adding like some hue colors here and there, some just slight shifts to make the surfaces a little more interesting. And then we'll continue with the polish, any other surface detail, damaging, that kind of thing. And then we'll probably bring it back into Photoshop at that point, as well as Maya to do some final stuff. So that's just a recap of where we're going to go from here. But right now, we got the head taken care of, and we're going to keep going. So make sure you save your project, and then we'll continue. All right, so let's do a pass now. That's all going to be about pushing the form, lightening stuff up a bit, maybe darkening some areas, but let's start that. So we're going to make a new layer. I'm just going to go ahead and call it overlay because I believe that's what we're going to use here. And then I'm going to click where it says standard blend. And we're going to find overlay in that list. So with overlay, if you haven't used it before, really, anything over 50% brightness is going to brighten the colors there, and anything underneath is going to darken it. So for example, right here I'm at like 32%. I'm going to grab just a soft brush. I'm going to unlock everything for now. And when I paint on it, see how it just got darker? And it kind of changes the colors as well. And there's similar modes that will change the colors in different ways. But for our purposes, overlay will be fine. And now if I bring it up past 50%, to like 70, see how it brightens it? So we're going to be using that. You could also take a look real quick at 50% and see how it does essentially nothing. So I'm going to bring it up maybe to like 70. And you could play around with it, change it afterwards, whatever you need. So I'm going to go 70, and now I'm just going to start with the shoulder pads. And I'm just going to brighten those up. Boom. Just hit it like that. I'm going to hide the shield real quick so I don't hit that. But basically, that's what we're going to be doing. So I guess I'll block the other stuff for now. The helm and the arm. So I don't accidentally paint on it. But yeah, so I'm going to go through and just pull that forward. See how it rounds out that shape? Maybe I'll make my brush a little smaller and just do it again in the middle. There we go. And now I'll do it on the back. Not as bold. Like I'll use my pressure sensitivity to my advantage and just do a slight sheen. There we go. So now I'll toggle it, and you can see right away it feels like it's Feels like it's rounder, right? And more metallic in this case. Now let's go. Why don't we just do that on the shield while we're here? And I'm going to do it. I'm actually going to pull it towards the center more because I'm going to treat this like it's an individual prop here instead of doing it in the center here, which I want to do that too, but I'm probably going to bring this up brighter towards the inside because as we get towards the center, I'm kind of vignetting it in a way where I'm going to let the outsides be a bit darker than the insides. So I'm going to lighten this as well and then put a lot of it in the center because we still, again, our goal is to make the form read, and this thing is rounded. So I want to pull that shape out. So I'll do that. There we go. Again, to toggle out of curiosity, you can see how it's pulling those shapes. And now sometimes I might go through and then erase in like the cracks and stuff, so they retain their darks. And I want to wash out all the crevices. I'd like to avoid washing them out. Okay, there we go. Now, I'll leave that one on there. Now let's move on to the next thing. So maybe the sword. The sword, I'm basically picturing it like a bloom from here. And I'm gonna do it kind of subtle here, but I'm just gonna lighten up this side. Again, it's like a vignette. I'm just gonna do it a little. I'm not gonna hit too hard with the sword. Do the insides here. So this side's brighter than that side. And then I'll use Shift to smooth it. And overlay is also pretty solid for doing like highlights and stuff along the edges, like edging. Pull out the rope. The handle. I believe this is, yeah, it's mirrored. And then for stuff like grain, I'm going to go in and I might brighten up the side that's getting the light. So in this case, these faces. Let's do the helm. Helps a lot on the helm, huh? And if it's not strong enough, we could also add some dark on the sides. I like to do this in a separate layer. A habit, I guess. You can do it on this layer as well, just by turning down your lightness. And then again with the other wood, I'm going to subtract it a little from the crevices. Just a little. And you see it starts to feel more voluminous overall. Do his face. His face is looking pretty good already, but we'll give it a little more. Just boop. Maybe his chin. But you get the picture. So we're just going through and we're just doing this to really push the shapes. Basically saying, yes, this is how it should turn with the light. Down here, I might give it a little extra. We'll see. It should be darker down there though, so maybe just a little right here on the top facing ones. And if it's ever too strong, you could either erase or just choose a lower brightness. Let's do the arms. The arms are kind of, actually I won't hide anything for the arms because the arms are kind of hidden as it is. So I'll keep them hidden and only illuminate the parts that would get the light anyway. Sometimes I'll texture almost exclusively just with overlay layers for a bit because it lets me not have to worry about the colors. I'm just like painting, okay, is brighter or darker, and then I'll collapse it down and do some more detail work on top of that. So it's a handy tool. Keep it pretty simple in the back here. I find that a lot of times when I paint, I don't really use the full range of contrast that I'd want to ultimately. And so this is a good way to kind of control that better. You could also like apply curves later. We'll probably still do that in addition to this. It's very additive the way I work. It's like building on, okay, I did this. Okay, how's it look? Okay, let's build on that. Let's build on that kind of thing. If that makes sense. The belt. Back of the helm. Remember, when I'm texturing this and I'm putting that light in the middle, I'm essentially in my mind thinking, okay, there's a light being cast here, and that's why you see me lightening up like these kind of areas. Like this is, I'm picturing is the side of this piece of wood has a piece that's going inwards, and so that face of the wood is going to be facing the way that will catch that light, right? So like same with right here, like that part of the wood's going to be facing that way. So I'm going to have it catch a little, even if it's less, catch a little, because we want to give the impression that it's getting the light, like the light is real, even though we're just making it up. That's why we did it here too. A lot of times it doesn't need much too, just a little. Just pull that shape forward. Okay. I guess let's just do a little on the rock. Little on the rocks. I know this is grass. Doing the grass too, I guess. My hand's just going, and I'm just following it. And then we might have to scale that one up. It's getting hidden. And then some rock. I'm going to choose the hard brush for rock here, actually. Don't necessarily need to, but it's a sharp shape, so I'm just gonna roll with it. I don't even know if I'm liking this. Let's see. Because I'm thinking now, like, I don't want it to have a lot of contrast because I want the top to be where the attention is. So I'll leave it there a little, and then I'm going to erase so it's not full strength. And we'll just add a little over here. And so let's take a look. So pretty cool. Makes a pretty big difference. Okay. So now I think I'm going to lower it overall just a little with textures, adjust. Where is it? Hue, saturation, lightness. I'm going to turn on preview, and I'm just going to lower the lightness a bit so it's not as strong. And I can toggle preview to see. So it was really bright. Maybe I don't want to go that low. Go like 90. I could also lower the layer opacity, but this is another option. Let's do like 95 or something. There we go. Because sometimes with overlay, it'll get too close to white. So I want to avoid that. And now I'm going to do one more layer. It's the darks. I'm just going to call it overlay dark in this case. Again, you could do it on the same layer. This is just a habit of mine doing separately. And I'm going to go to a darker color. And I don't want to go too crazy with this, but I'm going to see if there's areas I could push it down. See how it like darkens it. So I'm going to do that. And in some areas, it's good to, for like crevices and stuff, you could go in and add your contrast with this. If you want to add contrast to anything, like I'll add a little to the wood here. And what I like is that because they're on their own layers, you could adjust them real easily with either the layer opacity or the hue saturation tool that we just used. So now this is just another tool that you have to turn the form with. I think I'll keep that one like that. Maybe darken the top a little. There we go. So that rounds it out a little more. So I'm mostly going for the sides here. I kind of like that as it is. I might push it in a little where it meets, right, to really sell that overlap. Now the amount of contrast is going to be up to you, because I would say experiment with it. Paint it dark and then lighten up the opacity, or when we get to doing it in Photoshop with curves, and save out a couple variants at different opacities and see what you like if you're doing it for a personal project. See what feels best to you, because sometimes it's really cool to have not a lot of contrast. It gives it a different vibe. So I'm using it here both to darken and to like add crevices and stuff. So right here I might darken towards the bottom of the shield. Depends how metallic I want it to feel. If we're using specularity, we could get the metallicness in our spec map by having it shiny, but here we might want to give it some extra contrast. So now I'll go through, I'll make sure that there's shadows where it needs to be shadows. Like here there's a little, but maybe I'll give it a little more so it feels more cast, right? We already have some under the arms. Just reinforce it a little. Just basically pushing things a little more. Okay, well, I'm getting a little into polishing here because I'm being crazy. Let myself get caught up in it. Well, that's kind of, I mean, honestly, that's kind of cool when you find yourself just kind of going at it on autopilot, making progress. Like, oh yeah, getting into the zone. But for now, let's back off a little. What? I said a little. Okay. Now, where else might I want this? I think we're good. I think we're good on where I'm adding this. Maybe a little more to the bottom here. The other thing I'm going to do once we get in Photoshop is do a gradient from bottom to top. I like doing that a lot. It really grounds the entire asset. And I like doing that by just projecting into Photoshop and then throwing on a gradient and then coming back, and then it'll be on its own layer where you can control it. So we'll do that too. But not yet. Soon. 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 All right, I'm just going to toggle it real quick so I could see the changes we made. I'm going to save it. So let's toggle the dark. You can see we added a bit more contrast overall to the darks. Some, what's it called? Cast shadows. I might do a little more on the face in a second. We got a little more on the metal, the rocks. His belt was a good one. Really popped the belt and around his tabard. And then the brightness. So this was before. And then the bright and the dark after. So it's feeling pretty nice. We're getting there. Getting close. Getting close. And then we're going to paint over it a little. Because right now it has this feel of just like really being really soft everywhere. So we'll paint over it on our polish pass, and we'll kind of pull those values and mix them around in a more natural way. Because right now, yeah, it has like a little airbrushiness. It's not necessarily bad, but it's something that maybe you don't want to keep or retain in your final product. And it's all really subtle stuff, so if you're not seeing it, don't worry. It's not like huge, but it does make a difference. Or it can make a difference. That's rounded out a little more too. Didn't feel like it was like rounded all before. So it's rounded just a little. Okay. All right, so we'll continue from here to do some hue variations in like the wood and some of the metal. Maybe add some dirt to his body, stuff like that, and then polish it up afterwards. So there we go. Again, make sure you save, and then we'll continue soon. All right, so let's continue here, and we'll get to some polishing. We're gonna paint this bad boy up a little more. We're just about done, but before that, I know I said we were gonna do a gradient top to bottom, and we're gonna use Photoshop to do that. There's ways to do it in 3D Coat. I like to go back and forth with Photoshop. That's what I'm used to, so we're gonna go over that method. But before that, real quick, I want to point out something that the way I usually go into Photoshop is up here through Edit and then Edit Projections and External Editor. If you haven't used this before, it'll probably ask you where Photoshop is or whatever program that you can link up with it. I'm not sure what other programs it supports. I use Photoshop. But before we do that, we have to be aware that if there are layers in your palette here that are named the same, for instance, I had an overlay and an overlay dark, and then we did that once again to push the values even more. If we have them with the same name, when we save from Photoshop to come back into 3D Coat, it will combine them and just botch the whole thing. So take caution to name them something else or name them differently. So in this case, I'm just going to put a 2 at the end of them. That way we won't have any issue when we come back to Photoshop. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that top to bottom gradient first, and then we'll come back and we can texture the rest of whatever polish we want to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm just going to name it gradient. There we go. And then I'm going to go into, where is it here? In View, Orthographic Projection. There's a shortcut that's your 5 on your numpad, but that way you can see it now. We're viewing it from straight on. There's no more perspective. So from straight on, I'm going to hold Alt when I move the camera around, and I'm going to hold Shift to snap it, so I can snap it right to the front facing, so I know I'm front facing. And then I'm going to go ahead and we're going to press that button if you have your Photoshop set up. Now it pops this in here. First thing you want to do, I know we didn't paint in Photoshop for a lot of this tutorial or for any of this tutorial, but just a quick heads up, since we're doing hand painted type stuff, turning off the light map will let you be able to see it in the same colors we've been using that whole time. So toggling that off is usually the first thing I do. And then I'm going to go ahead and select that gradient layer we made, have that selected, and then choose the gradient tool here and make sure I have black selected with transparency. So up in the top left, it's black to transparent. And I'm just going to drag from the bottom up while holding Shift. And then you see how the bottom got really dark, and then going towards the top, it's less dark. And so I'm going to go ahead. It might geek out a little since some of this stuff might be symmetried on an angle, so we'll find out. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and hit. Actually, let me double check on the top here. It looks like I have radial, or like the bloom looking gradient instead of just the straight gradient. So I'm going to undo that one more time, bottom to top, and then I'm going to hit save, and we're going to go back, and 3D Coat should update. And we'll just kind of assess if there's any weirdness. So the first thing we notice is that it's only happening on the front, right? And there's some weirdness over here. So how do we get around that? It looks pretty good otherwise. There's some weirdness here as well. It could be because of the same issue as down there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clear this layer. Let's see if we can do it this way. So I thought I could do it that way. All right, so I'm just going to get rid of this layer and hit delete and make another one. Same thing, and I'm going to show you why. So I remade it. I'm going to go back to my front view, make sure it's there, okay? And then up here in edit, there's project through. Now this you got to be careful with, because anytime you go back and forth in Photoshop, this is going to say whether or not the projection is going to hit the back faces of your mesh as well. So I'm going to turn that on, and then we're going to go back to Photoshop. It'll ask if we want to update. In this case, yes. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to go back to the gradient. The thumbnails might not have updated, so you could toggle that if you want to see it. Otherwise, same thing. And save. And let's go back. Great. So it looks like it worked properly. And now we're not going to leave it at that strength, as you've probably guessed. So we still have an issue here where this is using, the nut is still using, or the bolt, the same texture space as the rest of them. So in this case, I might try erasing from it a little. Let's see. So it's not as dark. And then I still plan to kind of take those and make the top ones unique, or make some of them unique. So I'm not going to worry too much about that right now, but I'm erasing away just to get a little of that color back in the meantime. And then otherwise, I'm going to look around to see if there's any really standout issues. And it doesn't seem like it. So from here, I either just lower the opacity or set it on something like multiply. You might not see much of a difference. And then just lower that maybe to like 30 or 25. Not a lot. The point is we just want to subtly push the eye upwards. So in this case, it's like 24%. But you'll notice now when you look at it, I'm going to save it before I forget. You'll look at it, it just kind of draws our eyes a little more towards the top because the value is higher. Whereas if I turn it off, it's still kind of flatter. And if I turn that on now, even though it's subtle, and you could adjust how much you want that push to be, right? I might turn it up a little more. But that's your choice at that point. But it's a good way to direct the eye upwards. And we want to make sure that we go back and turn off orthographic projection. I mean, you keep it on if you want, but I like painting in perspective mode. You see it makes quite a difference. And then I also want to toggle back off project through. Sometimes if you're painting and you don't realize this has been turned on, it can be frustrating to have to undo your work or repaint it, or something like that can happen, and it's just not worth it. So I like to turn that one back off. So there we go, saving it again. And then I could turn this off in the meantime, because when I'm going to color pick and stuff on my other layers, I don't want to color pick the darker one, and then you can work on top of it. That's also an option, but I usually like to leave this on its own thing. So I'm going to create another new layer, move it down, and I'm just going to call this one polish. And let's just paint. Let's just go and paint on top of it. I have a couple ideas I want to try out here. And let me turn that back on. And yeah, so first thing I want to do here, like I mentioned in the previous video, is get rid of some of the kind of softness, like the airbrushiness in some of the lighting now, because of using the soft brushes with our overlay layers. So let's see. So I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to paint. Sometimes it doesn't take much just to break that feel. And I also want to add maybe a little damage here and there. If this wasn't symmetry, you could add a little more cuts and bobs and stuff. That wouldn't look as obvious, but it's fine. I'm going to break up a little of the perfectness on some of this. Like where it's like too clean, I'll just rough it up just a little. It comes down to preference here and in how much you want damage-wise. Because some people prefer that really clean look. I always like to give it a little grunge. But I often have to hold myself back too, because it's easy to get caught up in, you know. And sometimes you don't need that much to sell it. Like that's probably plenty for the belt. And we already painted some on there earlier. Now, in addition to this kind of stuff, you'll want to put in some other hues here and there. So I usually like to do this on another layer. I'm trying to decide right now if I want to do that in this case. There's nothing wrong with painting it all in one spot. But let's make a new layer real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. Make a new layer. I'll do something like color or hue. In this case, I'll do color. And then for the belt, maybe I want to put in, I'll just grab the color from the shoulders and let's see how that looks. A little too green. So I'm going to desaturate it a bunch. Maybe put it towards blue. Maybe that's too much. Something like that. A little less color. Well, let's play with that. The idea is just to give it a little variation. I'm trying to see if I can find a color note I like in there. I know, bad example. But I like to go in and just pepper it around. In this case, it's the only thing on there, so we could use the hue saturation afterwards to adjust it. But just something like that, like not a lot, right? I'll turn it off and back on, but it gives the surface, I think, a little more depth. And so in this case, if we want to explore the color afterwards, we can go in to edit, or is it textures, adjust, hue saturation lightness. I'll move this around out of the way, turn on. Is this the wrong one? I think I picked the wrong one. I accidentally clicked sharpen. Adjust hue saturation lightness. Move that out of the way, turn on preview. And now I can just slide hue and you see how it's changing. Now we used a very subtle color here as far as saturation goes. So we're not going to get a ton of variety. It's getting a little purple there, a little greener. Not a lot. So I'm just going to tone it down a little and go right there. But that's all. So you can kind of do that to your heart's content. I would try to keep it subtle if possible. And we'll go in and we'll do a little more of that after. But that's so you get the idea. So I'm going to go back and just like paint this a little more. Okay, with the wood, I think there was a couple places on the arm I wanted to touch up. And then let's add some moss and stuff to the wood. So with the wood, I want to go through. Let's cut through that gradient a little with some darks in the middle. I'm going to use a bigger brush here just to be a little bolder with some of these values. And then some of the contrast I'm actually going to tone down because a lot of the contrast in here is a little strong. Just feels a little better to me when it's not as bold in some places, because if you have too much contrast in certain areas, it's going to draw the eye there. And so it's good to have contrast to make something read a shape or a form, but if it's taking away attention from where you want your viewer to look, then it might be good to tone it down a little. Okay, so I'm going to start putting in a little, you notice I desaturated it a bunch. I'm going to start putting in a little desaturation here and there. Again, similar to like the belt, where it's like we don't want it to be one note as far as the hue. It's just a little less interesting. Plus, the real world's going to have light bouncing all around, you know, whatever environment this guy's going to be in. If we knew what environment he might show up in, we could also decide how to paint those kind of lights. So I'm going to do a little of this, and then I'm going to go ahead and I think we're going to add like some moss and stuff. Just doing a little edge work first. I think I'm going too deep. I'm going too deep. All right, save. And let's go ahead and just grab some greens, some light greens, and let's just give it a little. You know, I kind of want to match some of the rest. So you know what? I'm going to take the green from down here. That way it's already in our scene. And I'm just going to start building it up in some spots. Like maybe it's overgrown a little, you know? We're at the point where maybe I want to make this guy seem like he's been around. Maybe we'll add some more cuts. You know, he has some on there, but let's add some growth. It doesn't take much. Even just that added a lot more life, didn't it? Again, I want to make sure I don't overdo it, but to be honest, it's kind of fun. Shh, don't tell. That does remind me though of some advice I had gotten, where it's a problem I noticed in myself where I wouldn't push things far enough. It's easier and probably better to go too far and then rein stuff back rather than not go far enough. And so that's helped me a lot with color. It's helped me a lot with value. Just push things a little more, and then if it feels too much, then you bring it back. Right, so we got some green there. I'm going to add some over here. And we're just going to pepper it around this too. You know, I like to put it especially in like cracks and stuff. Make this thing look a little less like a face. you see nothing. But see how much that just the color, having another color in there, as opposed to it just being the browns, it really gives it some life. And experiment with it. I encourage you to just have some fun and push it more than you would. And then again here, maybe on the bottom here for sure, but also a little on the helmet. Now this is, on the helmet it's locked right now. Let me unlock that. On the helmet it's symmetried, so I want to make sure it doesn't look too obviously symmetried as much as I can at least. Here maybe it's growing through in the cracks here. That's pretty cool. Remember to zoom out too. Don't want to get tunnel vision. The hat also has a lot of contrast in it, so I might knock that down a little with all the cracks and stuff. I kind of like it because it is focal point. It's a little closer to the focal point, but on the sides and stuff, I might reduce it. We'll see. We'll play with that. And then down here, this is on the ground, so if anything, this probably has a lot, huh? And then I also want to add a couple more notes of color in with this green. The green itself helps a lot, but maybe we'll add a little greener, a little yellower green too. Like down here, maybe it gets a little greener. I don't know. Let's try it out. Maybe a little yellower. We'll take that back to the other areas and see how it looks there. Maybe a bit brighter since we're higher up. Introducing yet another hue. Maybe this one's just a lot less of it and it only grows on the cracks or on the outer edges. Coming up with some kind of rules for how you apply it can help it look a lot more consistent. So it's a bit much, but you know what? I dig it. I dig it. Might have to knock it back a little though in some areas. See, it's not tremendously different from the value we already have there, but just shifting the hue. Let's see. I'm going to try and knock back some of this contrast. we go. Let's toggle that. Yeah. Subtle, but it definitely helped. Now I want to give this guy a little dirt on him, maybe, as well as some like rust or something. Let's do that first. Add a little rust. So I'm going to go in, try to decide if I want to be like kind of rust. I guess we should use from his body. Let's see how this feels. I'm going to do another layer in case I don't like it. And then we can always merge it down. A lot of times I'll also use like a teal for the way the metal will degrade. Kind of like oxidization. The red's kind of working though. I might edit it a little, but it's kind of working. Not exactly, but we'll adjust it. I'm going to go through and just add it to the rest real quick. And then we'll adjust the color. Thinking maybe a little more orange, or we'll try the bluer. So I'm going to do the same thing as we did before, where we go to textures, adjust, hue saturation. It's going to remember what you did last time, so it might be weird at first. Then you could just adjust it afterwards. So I'm going to take this back down to 100, 100, or around there, and then adjust the hue. Oops. So yeah, a little more orange like that could kind of be nice. Saturate a little. Maybe adjust the lightness. I like the value to be somewhat close. So we could try that, or it's like more orange. I think that's kind of cool. And let me check like a bluer, like a green blue. Something like that is usually pretty cool too. It's like a little green. That's weird. So if I turn off preview, now you can toggle them back and forth. I like both, but I'm gonna go with the more rusty looking rust, just to have the contrast with like the moss. So I'm gonna bring that back, and I'll make it a little more orange than it was, and then just play with the saturation and lightness. There we go. So I don't want it to be like too in your face. It's just little subtle hits. Okay. Go there. And now I'm going to toggle it on and off. Then I'll commit that just by merging down. There we go. Maybe there's some dirt on this guy now. Right? Don't want it to be too clean. So it's just putting in some thought of the history of it, right? The environment that this thing lives in, what could have happened to it. You know, so give yourself like a little story. This guy's clearly been out here a while. Got some crap all over him, right? Maybe some darker stains here and there. Some dirt. Something that your viewer can kind of look at and be like, oh, it must have, this must have happened. Or I can see just by looking at it that maybe it's been out here a while. They dropped him and got dirt all over him. Stuff like that. It's becoming a lot less clean than we originally had him, but I think it fits the quote-unquote lore in this case. At least what I'm going for. So it's a little more roughed up at this point. I might revert some of this though. It's starting to lose the form when I'm doing that in certain areas. And so I need to be mindful of that. So at a certain point it just becomes noise and not what you're intending it to be. So watch out for that. The other thing I want to try right now is his tongue. I want to mess with the tongue a little. Maybe turn that green. Maybe that's also a leaf like his head thing. So I'm not completely sold on it as the color it is. So let's see. We can do the same thing where we add color layer. Or in this case, let's try hue. And I'll just grab the tongue. Grab a green. And just paint it. And this way we retain everything under it. But we get to change the color as we wish. So now it's kind of matching the top one. I'm going to do hue saturation again. Maybe it looks kind of weird like that though too. I'm going to tentatively leave it like that. See how I feel after getting used to it a little. It's kind of weird. It's not any weirder than that. I mean, it feels more like a tongue like that, but we'll see if it sticks. See if I like it. It could also be a piece off of his shirt too. I think I'll probably mess with that a little more before we're done. I'll leave it off for now. So yeah, something about it, I'm just like, we'll see. Okay. The grass back in there, rocks back in there. He's a little more grounded. And then same with the rocks. I'll put a little of the moss. Just gonna do it pretty rough though, rough and quick, just to get it in there, because it's not like it has to be precise here. It's more of the feeling, really. You're giving an impression. And then, of course, to turn that gradient back on, we'll take a look in a second what that looks like. There we go. It darkens it all, but we still retain the feeling. It still feels like they're all mossed up. And then there we go. Okay, so that helped break things up. It helped add a little more interest to stuff. I'm just going to make sure I save it. All right, get this guy front and center. And then from here, might do slight more polishing, but mostly going to be going in post process kind of stuff into Photoshop to adjust curves, levels, maybe some model tweaks and fixes that we talked about from before. Maybe add some alpha hay strands and stuff like that. We'll see, but we're going to start wrapping it up. Okay, there's a couple finishing touches I want to do left in 3D coat, and then we're going to exit that and get on with the rest of it. So I know I wanted to make a decision on the tongue. I think I'm not going to go with the green. I'm going to see if I could change this to a like less saturated, let's get it down here, less saturated brown-ish, like it's a dead leaf or something like that. Let's see if I can find it. So not quite human, but not the green either, just like a less saturated. Oops. This thing's flying all over the place. That way it doesn't stand out too much, but still there. Okay. So not a huge difference, just pulls it back color-wise a little so it doesn't look like it's full of too much life. Let's see here. So a couple other things I want to make sure I hit are the undersides of some shadows. I like to kind of push a different hue a little if possible. Let me go ahead and do a polish 2-layer, just standard. And then I'm going to go in and like, it looks like it's slightly more purple or something like that. But it looks like, I guess, just saturated. But I'm going to put in a little, maybe a little of the green or something. Let's just try it out. Really low opacity. Just want to get more of a hue change in there. But nothing too like obstructive or what's the word? Distracting. Let's also, if we need like a real world excuse for it, we could say the color here is bouncing back up because it's a silver object, and giving a little desaturated light on here. But I just want to keep it light. So if I toggle it, not strong, but you see the hue changes a little. I'll do it on the back here as well. Now this could be obviously a very personal artistic decision whether or not you like changing the color, temperature, hue in the shadows or whatnot. But you got to imagine it's the light that's bouncing up from the ground. So if you want to decide maybe there's grass on the ground instead, we go in with a little more green to kind of imply like, okay, he might be placed in an environment that has green. You know, we do have some grass down there, so we could play that up if we wanted. I'm going to keep it pretty subtle though, I think. Now I also noticed I was missing some of the dirt and grunge I put into the front side. Might have gone a little overboard, but I at least want it to be represented back here as well. Just to show that seeing some action back here too. Probably not as much as the front though, if we're thinking about him getting beaten up and used for practice. Most of that was probably focused on the front of him. But who knows? Maybe he's training some rogues. Doing their backstabs. Okay, not too much. That's just enough to grunge it up a bit, give it some color and hue variance in there. Sweet. Okay. The other thing I was thinking of is that perhaps with the mouth, I want it a little less clean like that and more like maybe someone took a knife and cut this hole in his mouth to give him some personality. So maybe I'll just pretend like some strands are going back and forth, right? So the rest of them, you have this like, hey, kind of strandy look. So I'm just gonna give it a little texture there. So it was like too smooth before. At least for my tastes. So not a huge difference, but it certainly feels a lot more organic than just the smooth look of it. Let's see. What if those are different colors? That's pretty weird. No, I'm not gonna overdo it. I could try like red thread, maybe make him look angrier, but I don't want to drastically change it at this time. That makes him look kind of angry. I mean, he still looks dead with the X's in his eyes, but he looks a little more antagonistic like that. I kind of like that. I'm not gonna lie. Gives a little color in his face too. I'll try it. I'll leave it in there for now. Pop a little of the saturation here. Yeah. Okay. I think I also wanted to add a little interest to the front. Nothing too crazy. I was thinking about adding like a bullseye or symbol, but I can't really think of anything that I was liking because the stuff in the concept, I thought it looked okay, but I tried it a couple times in 3D and I wasn't digging it. So I might just try adding something simple like a stitching. Something simple like that, just to give it a little more interest in his tabard front. It felt a little bare. I like simple designs, but at the same time, it felt a little more bare than I was going for originally because of the symbol on there. Just implying the stitching going in there, but without rendering it too much. I don't want to put too much detail. These are just kind of auxiliary reads. That's cool. Maybe it's a little too saturated or contrasty, so I'm going to knock it back a little just by painting over it lightly. There we go. Maybe we could do something like that in the back too. It's pretty cool. We'll go to the back. Maybe it's up here behind the shoulder so we don't really see it much. Right? It's kind of coming in from the V to the opposite side. So we could just use it to make these triangle shapes. That way it's a carryover, even if it's not something that we see a lot of. We could try putting it somewhere lower too if we want. It's pretty cool, but it runs counter to the shape down here, which I don't really like. It's creating that weird egg shape. And if it echoes it, I don't hate that, but it feels like it's overkill. I don't know. I like it better than it being blank, though. Yeah, we'll leave it in there for now. See how we feel. Okay. What if I did something like that on the front too? Maybe it's going to be too much now. Maybe it'll be too much. Let's find out. Doing it live. Now that looks like a smiley face. That's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. Kind of works in the back for me, but it's still weird. It creates these shapes. Nah, getting too much. I think that works fine, and then you can have an extra stitch in back there just for a little interest. Let's take it off again. Getting like a weird smiley face vibe out of it, but you know what? I'll leave it there for now. I'm not gonna overthink it. All right, oopsies. Every now and then, it doesn't want to save. Okay, and then I think I want to the more I'm looking at it, the rocks down there, I think they're getting a little too dark now with the gradient. Definitely want it to be darker down there overall, but I'm gonna switch to a soft brush and just slightly remove some of the top part of that, so they have their own little top to bottom gradient. So they're not too dark that whole time. There we go. So now I still have that getting darker towards the bottom, but they're not completely darkened out. Then let's see here. I might flatten some of this. It's getting a little noisy for me. I like to experiment with kind of texture, but then sometimes, you know, you'll come back to it and you'll be like, maybe it was a little much. Maybe I went a little too hard. Okay. Yeah, gave it a little extra kick. Not sure I'm feeling the red eyes now. We'll see. A lot of it is like very... I like it, but I'm so used to looking at the other one. You ever fall for that? Or you're just so used to looking at one thing that you're just like, oh yeah, that's how it is. That's always weird. Okay, let's see. I think we're going to start and go ahead and take this into Photoshop. So I want to get it out of here. So I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to export it. And now you got two ways to do this. You can either export with layers, with textures, export all layers color, or all of it as a flat with color and albedo map. So I would recommend all layers color so you get all these individually, but I might start simplifying this first. So in that case, going back in here, and when you're collapsing some of these down, if we want to just kind of flatten it, essentially, I'm going to save a new iteration first. That way I have another copy of this file just in case. But when I'm going down with things like the overlay layers, you could kind of flatten them down so that you could properly merge down in 3D Coat. And what I mean by this is if you just merge down, it might get all finicky. Whereas if we right click it first, so I'm going to go down here and hit apply layer blending, it's going to basically take all the changes and what they look like and make them just a standard layer. So any pixel that your changes on this layer touch, it's going to basically kind of bake it into just this layer. So what do I mean by that? If I look at this layer alone right now, by alt clicking it, we could see that that's what's on that layer. We painted in some shadows. Now, if I undo that by alt clicking again, and I right click and do apply layer blending, you're not going to see a difference, which is good. Up here now, instead of overlay, it's set to standard blend. And if I solo this layer again, now we see there's colors in here too, because it's picking up everything that was kind of underneath and baking it into the layer itself, just due to the way 3D Coat handles like those kind of adjustment layers. So now I'm going to do that with each of my overlay ones. And then I'm just going to merge them down on each other. So all my paint here, I'm going to go and I'm just going to merge these down. I'm basically just simplifying it for myself when I go in Photoshop, because the only things that I personally want on another layer right now are like the alpha map, and then maybe like the tongue thing on its own, or the gradient if I want them separate. That's pretty much it. Or if there's changes you're not sure of that you have on a separate layer, you could obviously keep that separate. So now I'm going to go ahead and just get these all, apply layer blending, flatten them to a normal layer. I'd kept these separate in case I wanted to make changes. It's been a while since we've done that. Clearly not making changes to these layers anymore, so I don't feel bad about kind of merging them down. Just making sure the ones under them are still standard. Okay. Then we got our first polish layer and our second polish layer on there. So I'm going to merge those down as well. I'm gonna rename this. I just like having anything called paint, so I'm just gonna say paint. And we got the tongue on one that we can edit in Photoshop if we want, the gradient that we could keep or adjust, of course, and then the alpha, which is gonna show us where our invisible pixels will be. So I'm gonna save this one more time, and then go ahead and export. Oopsies. Go ahead and export your all layers color and save it to wherever you want the file to be.